Well, hello everyone. Quite a few familiar faces here I've known over the years. My name's Rob Perry. I'm with the Creation BC Association. So we bring in guest speakers like Mike Oard here, who I'll introduce in a minute. And we are promoting the authority of Scripture. And Mike's an expert on that. I'll read his bio here in a second. Tonight we've got his topic on dinosaur tracks, eggs, and scavenged bone beds explained in the flood. Tomorrow he'll be here as well for the service where he'll be speaking on can Genesis 1 through 11 be taken literally. So you can find Creation BC on the internet at creationbc.org. And we are a nonprofit agency, and if you're a member, it's only $15 a year, and we can ship you for no shipping costs for any books or DVDs you purchase from us. But I'll mention more about that later. What we'll do is Mike will give his presentation, and then we'll have a question and answer period afterwards. And I'll step up before that, and we'll just give you a few more details about our organization and show you a few of the books we have. You probably noticed we have a book table in the foyer, and all of the stuff there is for free. We have a few, or for sale, we have a few free, no, it's not all. We have a few free DVDs we're giving away of various topics, so you can I'll tell you about those later. And importantly, tomorrow, don't forget the time change overnight. So you'll show up and Mike will already be done. So Mike Ord, we're very privileged to have him with us. He's an old friend of Creation BC. He's been to British Columbia before, and we've had him also do Zoom presentations. He's got his master's degree in atmospheric science from the University of Washington. He's also done extensive research in geology. He lives in Montana. There are a lot of fossil bone beds there. Dinosaurs and other non-dinosaurs. He's 30 years of a professional meteorologist with the National Weather Service in the States. He's written a dozen or written or co-written a dozen books. We've got some on our book table in the back. He also has published over 100 articles in periodicals, and I would call him an expert on the flood geology, so it'll be very good. He's also a Creation Research Board member. So we'll introduce Mike Ord here with that, and then I'll come back up before the question and answer period. Okay, Mike.
My laptop was a little high. Oh, yeah, I gotta turn this on. Okay, ooh, yeah, I better turn that down. Well, for some of you, I'm going to have to look over my laptop to see you. Anyway, this presentation is kind of a new presentation. It's kind of a retro look. That's what your pastor said. Anyway, the talk's about dinosaur tracks, eggs, and scavenged bone beds early in the flood. Secular scientists claim that with our biblical worldview, we can't explain anything out in the real world. So that would mean that the biblical worldview and the Bible are a fairy tale. That's what they're trying to tell us. But we should test them on that. We do have a lot of challenges, and the Lord has led me over 50 years of creation research to answer their challenges that they give us. Not necessarily to bash evolution, because when I got out of the University of Washington and decided to examine evolution, I found out there's hardly any evidence for it. It's really easy to see that it has multiple problems. But anyway, I'll leave that to you to read about it or look online at some of the websites I'll give you at the end to check that out for yourself. Anyway, I keep up with about 50 earth science journals in the Montana State University Library at Bozeman, Montana, where I live. And I come across their challenge. 95% of the material I read is evolutionary deep time material. So I know about the the challenges. And so I've worked on a lot of them for over 50 years. So here's just a quick list I made 5 minutes of my time. Here's another list. I'm not going to tell you what these are in particular. It'd take too much time. But there's one particular one that's considered a very strong challenge. Dinosaur tracks, eggs, and scavenged bone beds, in the sedimentary rocks. That is a major challenge. In fact, some Christians going to the university who've run into these tracks, it's shaken their faith to the core, like this man right here. This is reported in Science magazine by a guy named Godfrey, who says, by day quarrying through thin layers of rock, we started to come across footprints of terrestrial animals, says Godfrey. You can't imagine a global flood and animals finding ground to make footprints on. That, more than anything, any other experience in my life, really shook me to the core. I don't know how it ended up with him. This is just a report in the second most widely read journal in the world called Science. The first is Nature. So dinosaur tracks, they're a major challenge. We need to deal with them. But would you believe that the evolutionary people are challenged also? When I examine a challenge, I find out that secular scientists are also challenged. They make you think that they can explain dinosaurs with evolution and millions of years, and everything's really good. But no, they have some major challenges. Here's 4 of them. They've discovered recently that they've discovered a lot of dinosaur bones and tracks in the polar latitudes. So that has suggested to them that the dinosaurs lived in polar locations instead of the tropics. Another thing, they find a lot of desert prints, a lot of dinosaur prints in what they call deserts. I put that in quote because we don't think they're desert sandstones, but they do, and as a result, they got some big issues. Also, dinosaur soft tissue. By the way, how many know about the dinosaur soft tissue? Oh, maybe half of you. Good. All right. It's a big deal for us and a real challenge for them, as I will get into. And number 4, the extinction of the dinosaurs. Anyway, here's some of a plot of from an article in a book on the topic in the northern hemisphere. And by the way, this is rather old, and since then they've found more dinosaurs at high latitudes. Like in Alaska, they got a lot in northern Alaska, central Alaska, and now southwest Alaska, which isn't on there. Then you have them in places in Canada, and right up in here, you can see the plot of the dinosaurs. The dinosaur bones are this and the tracks. There's tracks in Spitsbergen, dinosaur tracks on the island of Spitsbergen, about 80 degrees north latitude. There's dinosaur fossils on Greenland, and they're in Siberia. So they're found in polar areas. Lately, they've found a huge amount of them in Alaska. Huge amount of dinosaurs in Alaska. So you got to ask the question, what are they doing in polar locations? And if we include plate tectonics in this, the latitudes of the northern hemisphere haven't changed much since the time of the dinosaurs, so that won't help. So, what's the problem here? Anyway, if you go to the southern hemisphere and assume plate tectonics, they believe that the dinosaurs they found in Southeast Australia, see my cursor shows up, does it not? Does it? Oh, darn. Okay. Anyway, in Southeast Australia, you find a lot of dinosaurs. and New Zealand. And to the east of New Zealand is the Chatham Islands. You find dinosaur bones. And they're supposed to be within the polar circle. And we find them on Antarctica. So this brings up a huge problem for the secular scientists. What? Oh, no, okay. Yeah. This is an experience. Okay, this is what the evolutionists say about this conundrum. Should we now imagine dinosaurs as thermally insulated, warm-blooded animals that plowed through snowdrifts and scraped the ice off the ground to find food? That's from Michael Benton in the journal Trends in Ecology and Evolution. And here's another guy, couple, Tom and Patricia Vickers-Rich, from the book Dinosaurs of Darkness. The picture of dinosaurs that were active in a country with permafrost and that consequently experienced winter temperatures which only a few mammals tolerate today is a very different one than the popular perception of all the dinosaurs as denizens of steaming tropical swamps. So, how do you solve that? What do you do? Well, I don't think they know. They're just presenting the problem. I don't think they presented a solution. Here's another one from the journal Paleogeography, Paleoclimatology, and Paleoecology. Even if polar dinosaurs were able to subsist on poor quality food for some time, a photosynthetic crisis of some duration would have been fatal to them because even this food resource would have become exhausted. There's nothing to eat in the cold up there. So, that's a big issue, and as far as I know, they have not solved it. And here's the desert dinosaur conundrum. The tracks occur, this is a quote from Martin Lockley, the top expert on dinosaur tracks, in the book Tracking Dinosaurs. The tracks occur at the top of the Middle Jurassic Entrada Formation. The main body of this formation represents an ancient sand sea. A sand sea is like what you see in the Sahara Desert. He says that, of the type associated with the Sahara Desert today. So what are dinosaurs doing in the desert? And they find tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of their tracks in what they believe is a desert. But what we believe is those sandstones are not from a desert. Okay. Yeah, I'm having trouble negotiating this because this is there, I'll do that. Okay. This is the Wankel T-Rex on display at the Museum of the Rockies in Bozeman, Montana, where I live. This is the one where they found the soft tissue. It's not there anymore. I think the Smithsonian kind of purloined it. And anyway, there was on display there in front of that Wankel T-Rex pictures of blood vessels with red blood cells in it. They found red blood cells of dinosaurs. And they found tissue which they could stretch and go back. And this is not an isolated event anymore. Members of the Creation Research Society, which is the oldest global creationist group in the world, we went out in southeast Montana and we found the horn core of a triceratops. And we probed into that and found soft tissues. We found unfossilized bone cells in it. So we found our own and other people. I mean, this is not an unusual feature anymore. And the Creation Research Society has been doing research on this for about 8-10 years. It's called the iDino Project. And you can see a summary of it back. There's a DVD on it by the late Kevin Anderson, who died of COVID about 3 years ago. and it's called something of the Jurassic. I forgot the name of the DVD, but it's on the table there. Anyway, Mary Schweitzer did her PhD thesis at Montana State University, and she's the original discoverer of this soft tissue. And she got her PhD, and now she's at the University of North Carolina, but she really got a lot of flack for this. And she made a lot of statements that showed how shocked she was. For instance, she said earlier in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, traditionally there was little hope that biomolecules might be recovered from bone more than a few thousand years old. In other words, if it's a few thousand years old, we shouldn't find any soft tissue within the bone. That was the original belief. But they did, and she said this later, it was totally shocking. I didn't believe it. That is the finding of likely red blood cells until we had done it 17 times. Anyway, there's a story about her which is sad, and this is why we need to be prepared as parents and grandparents to give answers to our kids. Mary Schweitzer probably went to my church in Bozeman, Montana. She was a young earth creationist, and she was going off to college, and she was going to challenge those paleontologists. Guess what? She didn't know anything hardly about it. She had no evidence for her position. At least I don't think so. Regardless, they converted her. So she became what's called an old earth creationist. She still believes in God and the Bible, but she's a theistic evolutionist. She's bought into that in the millions of years. So, did this soft tissue she find change her mind? No, it didn't. You'd think that, say, hey, this is a good piece of evidence that, hey, I was right all along. No, but she's right now trying to answer why this soft tissue can exist for over 65 million years ago, because that's when they believe the dinosaurs went extinct in their time scale, 65 million years ago. So that's the big issue there. Anyway, the last challenge they have is how'd they go extinct? They were worldwide, they were in polar areas, so why in the world would they go extinct according to their narrative? And this was admitted long ago by Glenn Jepson, saying, by far the most baffling question about dinosaurs is what caused their extinction. And you know, they have over 100 hypotheses on how they went extinct. Some of them are pretty entertaining. As you see there, chronic constipation. Now, that's serious, because what they think is, well, the plants evolved differently, and the dinosaurs could digest the plant material, and so that's why they went extinct. But anyway, meteorite impacts was considered a real long shot at one time. And now that's the major hypothesis that they have. So here's a kind of a cartoon about one of their problems, about their brains being too small. The picture's pretty bleak, gentlemen. The world's climates are changing. The mammals are taking over. And we all have the brain about the size of a walnut. Oh no, we're going extinct. But this is the real reason I think they went extinct. Don't ever take up that nasty habit, young people. Anyway, a dinosaur book on Utah that I read says this about why extinct. They don't know, really. They don't know where dinosaurs, what animal they evolved from. They don't know what it evolved into or why they went extinct, so they really don't know. Each can find at least some support of the geological, paleontological data that can be brought to bear on the issue, but the fact of the matter is that even now, at the end of the 20th century, there is no single explanation for the demise of the dinosaurs that is universally accepted by even a simple majority of scientists. And this was a time when the meteorite impact hypothesis was so popular. So, They have over 100 theories. They still haven't solved it. They have a lot of problems when it comes to dinosaurs. So it's not just creation scientists and Bible believers that have questions on all this. But we have our own challenges. What we are challenged with is how do we explain dinosaur tracks, dinosaur eggs, and bone beds that have been scavenged. The evidence of scavenging is we find bones with teeth marks on them, and we find the teeth of carnivorous dinosaurs in the bone bed, but we don't find the rest of the skeleton, which indicates the bone bed sat around and was scavenged. All this takes time, and these are live dinosaurs. And it all occurred during the flood somehow. And so that's the challenge. Here's that previous one was a dinosaur track from northeast Wyoming. That's from a small carnivorous dinosaur like Velociraptor, the star of Jurassic Park. Here is a giant duck-billed dinosaur track from found at the top of a coal mine in Utah. Yeah, they find dinosaur tracks on tops of coal mines in Utah, Wyoming, Colorado, the United Kingdom, and Queensland, Australia. So what are dinosaur tracks being on the top of coal mines? Well, we can relate coal to this hypothesis I'll be telling you about, how to explain this, called the beds hypothesis, which stands for briefly exposed diluvial sediments. So anyway, here's an old picture of dinosaur locations, 1,500 locations of dinosaur tracks, but they find many, many more each year. So you can triple this. These are the locations. They're found everywhere except, I believe there's none found on Antarctica. And Greenland, I believe there's dinosaur tracks found on there now. So that's where they are. They're global. And here are dinosaur eggs found in Mongolia. It's interesting that they found these in Mongolia in the 1920s, but they didn't find any more until they were discovered in Montana. And now they find them all over. As you see right here, here's a plot of dinosaur eggs, which are practically global. There are millions of dinosaur tracks in the rocks and millions of eggs. And so we're challenged to explain this happening in the flood. That's the challenge. And here's a few pictures of this is a scavenged dinosaur scavenging bone. This is a bone from the Blackfeet Indian Reservation that I got special permission to go look at. It was a fantastic dinosaur area, but no one is allowed to on there. Anyway, here's a bone where the teeth marks. And then in the Museum of the Rockies, I think this is a plate from a Triceratops, but it has teeth marks by those red triangles showing teeth marks. And here is another tooth mark punctuation on a bone. And this is a sample of the broken teeth you find in the bone beds. I believe this is a T-Rex tooth. So that's what you find, and that's what we have to explain. So are we up to it? Well, I apply this verse. This is my theme verse for all my research. Examine everything carefully. Hold fast to that which is good. I'm holding fast to the Bible as God's word. But the Lord encourages you examine everything, and not at the superficial level. That's a big problem if you do it at the superficial level, because you might know just enough to get in trouble. You got to examine these things carefully, dig down. That's why research takes so much time. And I spent 50 years at it. And I spent like 30 years in some issues that I'm still puzzling over. It's a slow process, and the Lord leads some people like me to do it, but not a lot of people I found out. I wish there were more, but anyway, that's the way it is. So the first thing we have to decide with these dinosaur tracks is, where are they placed in biblical earth history? Are they post-flood, pre-flood, early flood? They can't be late flood as the waters are draining off, because everything had to be dead by the peak of the flood, which is approximately day 150. So it had to be early in the flood. So we're always challenged that, how do you explain millions of tracks, millions of dinosaur eggs in the chaos of the early flood, which was really chaotic in a lot of areas, but not everywhere on the earth was it turbulent with fast currents. You had calm areas too. You had areas that were exposed above the waters for a while. So a lot of factors, a lot of variables in the flood. It wasn't just a simple rise of the water and a fall over 371 days. And it certainly wasn't a 40-day flood, as some critics have come to believe. So the way I determined this was actually pretty easy. The evidence for early flood, they're on top of thousands of feet or thousands of meters of sediments or sedimentary rocks. And then, because of erosion of the top, when the floodwaters ran off, you can show that thousands of feet of sediment were on top of these layers that got washed off. There's ways you can determine this, and I've worked on this, and I think I'm going to mention a few of these as we go. So, if they're on top of thick flood sediments, and thick sediments, flood sediments were on top that got washed off late in the flood, well then it's from the early flood. Early flood. And I and three other creation scientists are in a multi-year project determining the sediments in the ocean and on the continents, where they are, how they got there, and where they originated. We figured the amount of sediments in the ocean and what percentage of that was runoff. So we've determined that 1,900 meters were eroded during the flood runoff on the average for all the continents. That's huge erosion. And I have done a lot of calculations of the erosion in about 5 locations across the earth, and I get big numbers. For instance, the Colorado Plateau, as you see right here, it's an area of about 200,000 square kilometers. And the secular scientists say the average erosion of the Colorado Plateau lies between 2,500 and 5,000 meters. That's from a geomorphological journal called Earth Surface Processes and Landforms. Just think of that. In that area of the Colorado Plateau, 2,500 to 5,000 meters of average erosion. The continents are greatly scoured. And in the northwest Colorado Plateau, over the San Rafael Swell, I did a calculation by trigonometry, by the dip of the sedimentary rocks, and the distance from the top of a pass to near this town of Helper. And I got a figure of 4,200 to 5,100 meters of the San Rafael Swell, which is the area of the northwest Colorado Plateau. So there's been a huge amount of erosion of the continents, and the secular scientists have published a number of these, and here's some of them from the secular scientists. 5,000 feet in southeast England, which I've actually personally verified. 6,500 feet southern Rocky Mountains of Canada. 8,000 feet southern Africa. 10,000 feet the Welsh Mountains of the United Kingdom. 21,000 feet in the Appalachians, which I verified also, and 20,000 feet in the Flinders Range, South Australia. So a great amount of erosion to get down to the dinosaur material. So it's obviously early flood. So That's where I placed it. So how do we explain all this dinosaur activity early in the flood? Well, I examined the data, examined everything carefully, and I found some unusual features of the bone beds and the tracks and the eggs. Some of the unusual bone bed features are there's numerous dinosaur graveyards, some are that are huge. In Canada here at Dinosaur Provincial Park, there's a bone bed of over 10,000 over 10,000. They call them centrosaurs. They're ceratopsian, like Triceratops, but with different head ornaments. And in Montana, there's a bone bed that has 10,000 duck-billed dinosaurs, all the same species, in a layer only a meter thick and about 2 kilometers long and about 1 kilometer wide. 10,000 were estimated in there. So, and when secular scientists describe these bone beds, they use superlatives. Like a huge catastrophe inundated them, things like this. So their very words indicate that these were a watery catastrophe buried and formed these bone beds, commonly described as being in a flood. The bones are often jumbled together. Also, the bones are a little weathered, indicating rapid burial. And many bone beds contain just one type of dinosaur, like the one near in central Montana, 10,000 duck-billed dinosaurs of the same species. And this was a key factor. The bones of babies and young juveniles are rare. Now, when you bury animals today in a catastrophe, a mudslide or whatever you have, like in Africa, you end up burying the old and the young and the babies all together. So it's unusual to not find any bones of babies and young juveniles in these bone beds. Why could that be? Well, could it be that as the floodwaters were encroaching on the land, the adults and younger juveniles could run away, but the babies could not? And so the older dinosaurs herded up like elk in the wintertime where I live. Sometimes you find herds of 2,000 elk in places, and they died all together in a catastrophe. That's kind of making some sense. Whereas if this was a natural feature, it's rather unusual to find, especially the lack of baby and young juvenile bones. So that got me thinking about the tracks, which I'll get into. But first of all, I want to show you a dinosaur graveyard. This is pronounced Coliphus. It's a small dinosaur like Velociraptor, and they're all jumbled together. I think over 1,000 of them in New Mexico. So you find these are typical examples of bone beds, indicating a huge catastrophe to bury these sorts of things, not normal burial of dinosaurs living in a natural environment. And then there's so many bones in some of these bone beds that some enterprising people made a dinosaur bone fossil cabin in eastern Wyoming. Track features especially got my interest. When you looked at tracks or trackways, a trackway is 2 or more tracks that are lined up. The tracks of likely poor swimmers are rare. Which ones would those be? Triceratops with that big, huge, bony frill. Ankylosaurus, which is like a tank with spikes on it. And Stegosaurus. You wouldn't think they would be good swimmers, so maybe that's why they're not there. But there's a lot of tracks of duck-billed dinosaurs and theropods, which are your meat-eating dinosaurs like T-Rex. Lots of tracks of those types, which should be good swimmers because they got big legs and small arms. They look like they would float pretty well. So It's making sense that we're talking about a huge watery catastrophe in all this somehow. Okay, this one especially got my attention. The trackways are practically always straight or gently curved. What's the significance of that? Well, I hunt elk in the winter in the snow, and I follow their tracks. And generally they go all over the place until I spook them, and then they go in a straight line away from me, unfortunately. So, is it possible that the reason they're practically always straight is because they're trying to move away from the encroaching floodwaters? I think so. A catastrophe was going on, a watery catastrophe was going on. And then when you find these tracks, they're always on a single flat bedding plane. Sedimentary rocks are made up of layers, and within those layers you find thinner layers called bedding planes, flat bedding planes like this. The tracks are always on one single bedding plane. They don't jump from one to another, like they don't seem to have any hills to climb. It's always flat everywhere where they make tracks. And then and another thing that's kind of unusual is that in northeast Wyoming, there's a spot there where they found a particular type of dinosaur track. They found tens of thousands of them in this one area. And then they had about 100 meters of sediment above it, and then another set of tracks, but of the same types of dinosaurs. And they said that 100 meters, it was deposited over 3 million years. So what's the odds of the same type of dinosaur making tracks and 3 million years later coming back and making tracks above where they were before, about 1,000 meters higher? Not very practical, not very likely, I should say. Now here is a plot of the dinosaur tracks in a place in northeast Wyoming, and they plotted the tracks at this location. Notice how they're all generally straight or gently curved. So that's typical. Also, I discovered that the eggs are there's unusual features of the eggs. Now, when reptiles lay eggs, they dig a hole or they put vegetation on it, or both. But when you find these eggs, you find them in clutches usually of groups. And you find there's very few nest structures. The number of nest structures are probably less than a dozen. And there is no evidence of vegetation. They're laid on flat bedding planes. And the problem with that is the dinosaur eggs are very porous. The embryo would dry out. So this is not a natural egg laying at all. In fact, it appears that they laid it in a hurry on the flat bedding plane and just took off because they were in a hurry. They didn't have time to make a nest or put vegetation on it. And this is one of the few real nest structures. It's kind of a bowl shape that's found on what's called Egg Mountain in central Montana. This mountain, by the way, is only 50 feet tall, so I don't know why they call it that. But they found a huge amount of dinosaur material up here, lots of nests, and this is one of the few real nest structures. So, how can you account for this? Well, I developed a hypothesis or model called the BEDS hypothesis. BED stands for Briefly Exposed Diluvial Sediments. Diluvial is another word for the flood. In other words, you expose flat-laying flood sediments that were just laid down flat. And so why would you have briefly exposed diluvial sediments? Because the floodwaters don't go up nice and even, then come down nice and even. They're going up, but they're oscillating like this as they go up. Because of various mechanisms during the flood, which I will point out here pretty soon, sea level oscillates in the flood, local drops expose flood sediments that were just laid down in their flat bedding planes, and rises will cover up to preserve the features. See, this is one problem the secular scientists have. Tracks are ephemeral. If you make a track in the mud or in sand or whatever, it's not going to last more than a few days to a week, and it disappears. But you got to preserve these things by putting sediment over them and preserve them. And this is what they have a problem with. So how does this work? Here's a little block diagrams. It's kind of like a cutaway of an area, say 150 kilometers wide. And you're just getting a cutaway. And this is various times in the flood. In areas of rapid sedimentation at T1. Oh, my cursor doesn't work very well, does it? Yeah, it's on the wrong. Yeah, I'm in presenter's mode. I usually don't use that. So that's what kind of confusing me. But anyway, at T1, the sediments are pretty down low, but you have rapid sedimentation. And T2, it's up higher, and T3 is up near the top of the floodwaters. But then you have a local drop in the floodwaters, and you expose that flat bedding plane over, say, 150 kilometers. And therefore you have a flat bedding plane for dinosaurs swimming in the water, trying to survive, or on high land nearby that embark on that area, make tracks, lay eggs, and eat if they have time and they're not too spooked, other dinosaurs that have been dead and scavenged them. And then you have another quick rise, and you cover up this material. So that's the beds hypothesis. So what mechanisms would cause the floodwaters to oscillate a lot? Well, tectonic uplift or subsidence. One thing we had in the flood was tectonic. Now, tectonics is earth movements, either up or down or horizontal, like in catastrophic plate tectonics. But you had a lot of this going on. So it's possible that an area that was under the water for a while, and it's uplifted like that, and it's exposed for a while. Tsunamis can cause the water to go up and down, but these would be very destructive at the edge of the briefly exposed diluvial sediments, but it would diffuse its energy there, and then it would slow down, and then it would cover instead of erode. So lunar tides, and with generally with the floodwaters covering most of the earth, tides are going to be quite large. And there's crustal shifts from far away. Tectonics going up and down will cause waves. So there's lots of mechanisms. And for quick uplift, sinking and falling, and then slow uplift and falling. So you have, you could have exposed land for a week, for instance, exposed bedding plane. So here's a few diagrams of it. Here's oscillations from tectonics, a rise and a fall over 7 days. Here is how I view tsunamis, where the water is going up and down in quick succession. And then oscillations from lunar tides, as the floodwaters are generally rising, but they're going up and down from the lunar tides. And from far tectonics, sending waves across the earth, you're going to have up and down. So here's a few little schematics to kind of give you an idea. These were drawn by my artist, Melanie Richard. We have briefly exposed alluvial sediments. They're making tracks, and they're coming up and covering them up with muddy sediments. This is not clear water. Cover up the tracks, eggs, and the bone beds. Here's another, and then it can go back down, and they can come back in the same area if they're not dead. And here's another one right here, where the water went down, exposing it. Remember, these are just cutaways from a broad area. That's what you got to think of. And so tracks, laid eggs, cover it, Usually it'd drive them off of that land, but my artist drew it where they held on, but it covered up all that material to preserve it till today. And then it can go down again, and they can do the same thing, make tracks and eggs at a higher level than the one below. So we can explain things like that. Also, on these, where you find this dinosaur tracks and eggs, you find associated features. You find what's called mud cracks, true mud cracks. Now, sometimes mud cracks can be formed underwater, but these could be true mud cracks. I was in Tucson once, and they had a lot of rain that filled up those drainage ditches. And when it drained, within one day, some of the sediment along these arroyos, I think they call them, was dried and mud cracked. And even there was raindrop imprints on some of them. So all this can occur rapidly. Mud cracks can occur within a day. And raindrop imprints. Now it's interesting that on these, where you find the dinosaur material on these beds, you don't find a lot. You find some raindrop imprints, but not a lot, which tells me that this material was formed after day 40, because the first 40 days was heavy rain. So you'd wash all the tracks out. So it'd have to be between day 40 and the peak of the flood at day 150. Also, you find bird tracks along with dinosaur tracks. You find coprolites, what's called paleosols, which they think are ancient buried soils, which to me I think are chemical reactions in the soil. Burrows and tracks of invertebrates and social insect nests are also found associated with these features. So here's a few pictures of this. These are mud cracks found at St. George, Utah, dinosaur discovery site at Johnson Farm. Probably none of you have been there before, but you can go there, look at mud cracks. You can see a lot of dinosaur features. And you find raindrop impressions, circular little divots. They're not very distinct there. And on here you find burrows of invertebrates. Here's some bird tracks. And you can place it. It's got to be before the peak of the flood at about day 150, but after the 40 days and 40 nights of rain, so it's about between day 41 and day 150, but probably well before day 150, because remember I said a lot of sediment was piled on this and then eroded off. Well, to pile that on, it probably reached a peak at day 150, so you're still adding sediment. So you can probably pinpoint these tracks between day 41 and day 120 in the flood. That's kind of a bonus for you. Anyway, in summary, dinosaur tracks, eggs, and scavenged bone beds occurred early in the flood. They can be explained by the beds model. In fact, some secular scientists claim that this was an impossible challenge for us. In fact, that's why I took it on. And I believe I found a reasonable model or hypothesis to explain it. So sea level, or the flood level, falls to expose beds and rises to cover up the dinosaur features. Beds explains associated features and indicates dinosaur features formed from day 140 to about day 120. All these dinosaur features are worldwide, indicating a local flood, as some theistic evolutionists try to claim. No, a global flood. This supports the Genesis flood, and the whole Bible is God's word. Some implications. Now, these are implications of what you can do for other challenges. By the way, there's just more than earth science challenge. The only reason I know about them is because that's what I deal with. But there are challenges in biology, there's challenges in astronomy. But we have a lot of answers to a lot of those challenges in all these fields. By the way, there's challenges just living in this society. So there's challenges everywhere. And if we apply 1 Thessalonians by sticking to God's word and examining everything carefully and knowing Scripture well, we can navigate through some of the challenges of life that we have in this culture. This is an example of how to find good answers to other challenges. We got to stick to 1 Thessalonians 5:21. We have to be like the Bereans. Check it out. Check it out. Examine all the data thoroughly, minus the interpretation. See, we don't have any debate about the data, the observations. It's the interpretations of those. And the interpretations of those are based on worldviews. If you have the naturalistic or atheistic worldview, you're going to view it a certain way. You're going to view it through the lens of evolution and deep time. But if you have the biblical worldview, you'll examine it from the point of view of the Bible. And when you do that, we find answers. That's why there's so many creationist organizations out there now, a lot of speakers, and we have well over 1,000 resources, books and DVDs, and websites with a tremendous amount of information, which I will give you soon. And like I said, usually evolutionists are challenged also. You dig deep enough, you'll find out that they're challenged. And a lot of times you might not know it because they kind of bluff their way through a lot of problems by papering it over with another hypothesis or minimizing it or not even talking about it. And I commonly find answers to challenges within the biblical worldview. So we can stick to the Bible and find answers. Anyway, I'm going to tell you about a few of our resources back there. There are several answers books. It's not showing up anywhere. Where is it? It's not there. Okay. Answers book. Now, in a crowd like this, there's a lot of people with questions. And I told you we have developed answers. So that's why we have answers books. Also, this is an answers book of a different type. These are more in-depth answers that I edited with Dr. John Reed called Rock Solid Answers. And we edited this book, and we had, I think, about 14 creation scientists write in various fields, giving their answers to various challenges. And so this is a more in-depth answers book if you're looking for that. Anyway, I want to leave you with this key verse right here from 1 Corinthians 2:5. If you're wondering about the wisdom of man and what people say at universities, read the first 3 chapters of 1 Corinthians. It'll give you some insight. And one verse is, your faith should not rest on the wisdom of men. The wisdom of men is trying to explain everything without God. Everything, not only in biology, but they have ideas of the evolution of the earth, the evolution of the universe. Even the elements in the periodic table evolved, by the way. Everything evolves because there's no God there to direct it. We shouldn't depend on that. That's all their speculation without God. Our faith should rest on the power of God, who has the power to create and cause a flood and do anything he wants. It's not an issue. Anyway, here's some of the websites for your edification. Before I forget, I'll talk about my own down there. I have 2 free ebooks on there. One is about the runoff of the floodwaters and how they erode the land, that 1,900 meters of erosion, and they erode in certain ways and leave features on the landscape that secular scientists cannot explain. Planation surfaces, water and wind gaps, for instance. So it's there, free for you to do. It's color pictures. I love the book. Now I want to talk about creation.com and answers in genesis.org. These websites have over 10,000 articles for all scientific abilities and all ages. So if you have a friend that tells you, Where did Cain get his wife? And you can't answer that. You should be able to answer it, but if you can't, go to the website. What about carbon-14? What about dinosaurs? What about dinosaur tracks? How can you have dinosaur tracks in the chaos of the flood? I've heard these things before. You can go to the website and get answers because these things are published free on the websites. And like I said, creation.com actually has over 13,000 articles on it. And these are articles from our creationist technical literature. See, they don't let us publish in their technical journals, so we have our own. We have 3 of them right now. The oldest is the Creation Research Society Quarterly. It's been around about 60 years. And we have the one from Answers in Genesis called Answers Research Journal, which is free online. Then you have the Journal of Creation, which is, you have to pay for that, but it's online. Those are our 3 technical ones. And from that, there's articles going back 60 years. And also we have a lot of layman articles from like Creation Magazine. Does anyone get Creation Magazine here? A couple of you, yeah. It's a great magazine, no advertisements, all in color, goes out to over 100 countries in the world. It's a great resource for you, and it's for laymen and children. So they bring in articles like that. So whether you get challenged by somebody or your kids come up to you and say, what do you do about carbon-14? You can get answers if you don't know. It's good if you do know, but if you don't, look at the website. So now I'm open for questions and answers. Thank you.
Just before we go to that, I'll tell you a little bit about Creation BC. So we've been involved with the Creation Ministries since the time of about 60 years ago. So our first president worked with Henry Morris and got him involved in bringing the first Creation Association to Canada, and that was in British Columbia. It spread across all of Canada as one unit in, I think, all the provinces, till it got so big that they broke them up into different provinces. So Creation BC has been around for a long time.
Good.
And yeah, we're very happy about that. We have our, as well as these other websites that Mike mentioned, we have our own creationbc.org. It's out of the mainland, and we've got resources for sale there, DVDs as well as books, many books, and we bring them all in through organizations like CRI and Answers in Genesis, and then we just provide them as a service for sale. If you're a member, you get free delivery. Membership, you can fill out the form online. You can become a member back at our table there. There's some forms. Membership's $15 a year, and it goes towards just supporting the ministry. If you want to be on our email list, we have just a little form at the table you can fill out. We don't send you tons of emails and spam you, but it just tells you when the guest speakers are coming, what areas they'll be in. You might get the annual report or something like that if you're a member. We do have an information brochure at the back, sort of our purpose and work with the association. Mike mentioned Answers books, so we've got lots of resources back there, lots for kids as well. So we have a whole series of 8 books on Answers books for kids. And this one, volume 2 particularly, is about dinosaurs and the flood of Noah. And that's $10, each of those are $10. And we do have some of Mike's books here. So there's a geologic column, which is very interesting. You'll see I assume you'll see the truth about the geologic column. There's a lot to it, and it's very interesting how they make the fossils fit their preconceived idea of long ages. It's fascinating. So with that, we'll go to, I'll pick that up. We'll go to questions and answers. Perhaps we'll just have you speak loud enough that Mike will repeat. Oh, we do have a roving mic. Okay, I'll grab the roving mic then.
Yeah, I got get down on here and rove around myself. Oh yeah, legs get stiff.
Any questions?
If something's deep in the ground, is it calcified from the flood? Well, yes and no. Some of the fossilization minerals are calcium. Calcite is one of them. But you have another one called silica. Those two especially fossilize. Silica mainly fossilized wood. Practically all wood is fossilized by silica, silicon dioxide.
So when they found like the eggs, right? Then is that fossilized from?
The eggs are, they're not calcified. They're fossilized. I think they're fossilized. I've found them out in the field before, and maybe they're not. They're probably variable. Some are probably not even fossilized, and some are. It's like dinosaur bones. Some are fossilized, and we find a lot of soft tissue that's not.
They were able to find like blood cells, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so if they were able to find blood cells, then that means that they were then fossilized because then they would be preserved within bones.
There's two types of soft tissue. There's soft tissue that is actually fossilized, and there's soft tissue that's not fossilized. That's not fossilized is the stuff you can stretch like that.
Like fat.
Yeah. So it's variable. So you have some. The fact that it fossilizes before it could decay is pretty good in itself. Because fossilization supposedly takes a lot of time and it should decay by then.
But if it's in a flash flood that suddenly happens, then that means everything would be sped up.
Yeah, the flood can speed everything up. The flood is a global flash flood.
Right.
Yes, I'm not sure I answered your question directly, but let me tell you a little bit about fossilization. Fossilization is a rare event today. It hardly ever happens. You got to bury something rapidly and deeply, and you got to get the fossilizing fluids like the calcium or the silica moving horizontally or maybe vertically into the bone or the shell and turn it to stone rapidly before it rots. The fact that we have trillions of fossils in the sedimentary rocks is testimony to the flood. In fact, that's why Ken Ham says, what's the best evidence for a global flood? Dead things buried in rock layers all over the earth.
Well, they were able to find mammals, right, that were still pregnant within rock beds.
Mammals that are pregnant. I don't know. I hadn't heard of anything like that.
Which is something that I saw.
They have a fossil of a extinct marine reptile in the process of giving birth. I can show you that real quick if you want, but
It's just my own curiosity, that's all.
okay. Yeah, other questions?
Yes, I'd like to know if there have been any debates since Bill Nye and Ken Ham, and secondly, if that answer is fast, I'd just like to get an update on what the current status is of if Creation Ministry is growing and like the secular attitude for these things as they found out about soft tissues. Are they still just living in deep denial, or are they just trying to find another asteroid, or what are they doing?
Well, there's been no more debates. How many have heard of Dr. Dwayne Gish, who debated, had hundreds of debates in college campuses? And he used the same argument every time, many of the gaps in the fossil record. And he won practically all of them. And the reason I know that is not because I'm biased, because I read the material that said that he did that. And guess what they decided to do? We are no more going to debate any creationist. So there's a few debates that have come about over the years, but they're really isolated, like that Bill Nye Ken Ham debate. That was But in general, they won't debate a creation scientist. So that's where that is. As far as soft tissue, Mary Schweitzer, who was the original discoverer of it, she's trying to find a way how it can exist for over 65 million years. So she's dreamed up one hypothesis I know of, in that she says that iron from the hemoglobin in the blood preserves it somehow. We can't figure out quite how. She's done some experiments on this by covering chicken bones with blood or something, and they last for a little while, but it's a very pathetic experiment. But at the Creation Research Society lab on Arizona Christian University campus, we have gone through that a lot, and we have people that have reported on their results, and it's really not going anywhere, but it's really an ad hoc dodge. It's just, how can even that work for over 65 million years? But they're still trying. But they're not going to give up. They're not going to give up their millions of years for that and many other challenges to their millions of years, by the way. They're not going to give up on it. Why? Because this whole area of creation versus evolution does not depend on evidence. It's a belief system because they want to believe what they want to believe, and they reject what we say automatically. It's pretty stark. So there's hardly any secular scientists that ever become creationists. A few have. But so it's pretty sad out there that they're not only not open-minded, but they're trained to think that we're idiots, and so anything we say is not even worth listening to. So they block their minds, and when they get challenges, they either paper them over with a hypothesis, minimize it, or ignore it. So I've seen this quite a few times in the 50 years of reading their material. So I hope that answered your questions. Oh, I need to remember to repeat the question also. Oh, you got that mic? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, do you think the church has done a good job of training little children to understand the principles of the flood and, how large the ark was, maybe
Mm-hmm.
layers and how they form quickly?
Yeah.
Could you make a device that would show how beds work? It seems like that's an interesting thing. Could make like a snow cone sort of thing that layers it out and demonstrates what.
You asked a lot of questions. Let's see.
You got two questions in back there.
Yeah, that's fine. What was your first one so I can concentrate on it?
Does the church do a good job of
Yeah.
training the little children to understand the flood?
In general, no, but Answers in Genesis has these great summertime, they come out every year with a different, I can't think of the term. Yeah, vacation Bible school things, and that's helping. Our churches has it every year, and we get a lot of kids, and so some churches are, like the one I go to is a large church in Bozeman, and we're gung-ho on doing this. But in general, over the years, we haven't. A lot of pastors get their education from seminaries that teach them evolution in deep time. Most seminaries do this. In fact, if you want to go to a seminary or a Christian college that does not, you'll have to look online at Answers in Genesis, and they'll have a list of ones, and it's a small list compared to all them out there. So your pastor's been trained to believe in evolution in deep time. So he rejects anything that we bring up. And then other pastors aren't sure what's going on, and they think it's divisive, as if Jesus isn't divisive, but so they won't let you in. But there are churches that do, and we're making good headway with them. And I think it's looking positive. People are getting educated. I mean, but before 1961, evolution and deep time practically took over the whole of Christianity. And that's why we have so many liberals, by the way, in Christianity, because that ends up, when you throw out parts of the Bible, you end up in liberalism coming up with all kinds of strange things. But before John Whitcomb and Henry Morris published the Genesis flood, we were almost taken over. And that started a renaissance in the church. People realized and started looking at this stuff and said, wow, this stuff is damaging not only to Christianity but society. And besides that, there's a lot of evidence against it. So it's kind of mushroomed. It's a slow mushroom, but I think it is really vitalizing people's faith. It's greatly increased my faith because I can now say that with the biblical worldview, I can explain the real world, the data in the real world in earth science. And it's not intimidating to me at all. So it's greatly increased my faith and people who've dealt in this. That's why we have so many resources. We have so many organizations out now. You have an organization in, I think, most provinces of Canada. Probably not the Northwest Territories, I'll bet.
Probably not.
So, did I answer that question?
You answered one part of it superbly awesome. But do you think you could make a device, sort of like a snow cone, so if you're a snow globe thing that you could shake and demonstrate that best principle that you would set?
Yeah, when you get sediment, there's this device that's kind of glass plates. You've probably seen this, has different colors of sediment. You shake it, and it kind of comes out like that. Yeah, you can, layers form easy in sediment because if they have different particle sizes, shapes, and density, and they're moving along, they will fall out based on those principles and form layers really easy. So layering is not a problem. Some people think it should be just a big mess out there if it's the flood. No, layers can form really easy, and you change currents from a different direction. You might get a sand. A different direction, you might get a mud that when you press it down becomes a shale. And then you have, if it calms down, then you have limestone dropping out of the water. And so, yes, you could form those layers fairly easy by different shapes of the particles, densities, and so forth. Lots of questions popping up.
Was there any ever evidence of human fossils being found in any of the city layers of dinosaurs, just to show, say, that humans getting killed at the same time in the flood?
Yeah, human fossils, whether the time of the dinosaurs or not. There's some controversy over that. How many have heard of the Paluxy River human tracks? Well, that's kind of a bag of worms right now. We probably don't think they're human tracks anymore. That's kind of the consensus, but it's controversial. It was controversial when it was first found. Some things came up, and so John Morris withdrew his book as a result on the topic, and so we've kind of stayed away from it. See, we have several hundred pieces of evidence. So this one has become equivocal, and so we decided to play it safe and just stay away from it. It's like the vapor canopy idea. That looked good for a while, but the problem with water vapor is it's a huge absorber of solar and infrared radiation, and it's not only going to heat that layer up, it's going to heat up the surface below the canopy. And it's not difficult to understand this from an atmospheric science point of view, which is my field. So that's why we've kind of not talk about it anymore. So we have those things. That's the way science is. You have a good idea, you do research, it might pan out or it might not. So you got to change your ideas. Be open to changing your ideas. Yes.
Would you comment on continental drifts? The whole idea
Yeah, Pangea. I get that asked that question all the time. Well, for me, it's been a long story. Since I keep up with 50 earth science journals, I find a lot of contradictions to plate tectonics in the literature over the years. So I've been skeptical of catastrophic plate tectonics. That is a model that John Baumgartner has built on a computer where he believes in rapid seafloor spreading and the continents moving maybe several meters a year. Not only the continents, but the plates. The continents are on the plates, and the plates move. And I was skeptical of it, but I found something just recently within the last year that has convinced me that it did occur when you can match certain things across the South Pacific. Too exact to come about by chance. They had to be connected. But there's problems. Like I said, I find the problems with all this too. For instance, you can show that his model only starts in the middle of the flood. It spreads out like that. So advocates of catastrophic plate tectonics says, what have we had before that? Before Pangea split? Well, the secular scientists come up with about 5 other major continents. The previous one to Pangea is called Rodinia. And one person I know believes Rodinia split like that, stopped, and came crashing back together to form Pangea, one continent called Pangea, and then that split. I don't believe that's even possible. I believe it split, that's fine, but to find a mechanism to make it stop and accelerate back and crash, I just don't buy it. So I've been working on another model of the flood for many years, which I think can be amalgamated with catastrophic plate tectonics, and that's meteorite impacts. Because we have evidence of about 200 meteorite impacts during the flood, and they're discovering a lot of meteorite impact features in what's called Precambrian rocks. In fact, Sudbury, Ontario has one of the largest known impacts. It's about 200-kilometer diameter crater in southern Ontario, but it's been eroded 5 kilometers, indicating that, and the shield itself, the Canadian shield, has been eroded maybe an average of 5 kilometers. That's a huge amount of erosion, and that can account probably for the sediments in North America, all that erosion. But anyway, the impacts. So I think that you had a lot of impacts early in the flood, and that might have been the mechanism of the flood, and it might have caused catastrophic plate tectonics. But catastrophic plate tectonics, which I now accept, starts in the middle of the flood. And you had a lot of geological action early in the flood. So there's a fair amount of controversy within what's called flood geologists, which there's probably about 30 of us around the world. And we sometimes debate these ideas, and so it's kind of in a state of flux at the moment.
So I'm wondering about the Middle East. You haven't mentioned anything about the Middle East area.
The Middle East. What do you think about the Middle East? What are you looking for? Sedimentary rocks out there, or where the Ark landed, or where the Garden of Eden may be?
Well, think about
Oh,
dinosaurs.
dinosaurs. They actually there's actually dinosaur tracks in Israel, which I've seen. There's not too many dinosaurs in the Middle East that I know of. And the Middle East has thick sedimentary rocks. Some people think the Garden of Eden is around the Tigris-Euphrates rivers. No, that Tigris-Euphrates rivers, there's thousands of meters of sediment below that was from the flood. So, and where the Ark is, if you're referring to that, we really don't know where the Ark is. Some people think it's on the mountains of Ararat. Mount Ararat is made up of 2 mountains, by the way, Greater Ararat and Lesser Ararat. But other people don't think it's there because the name Ararat has changed over the years. And that's about all I'm going to tell you because that's all I know. I just don't know a lot about that area, and I generally stay out of that. There's certain areas I stay out of because we don't have answers. And if anyone brings up that question, I will let you know. I just don't know. Like chronology. I stay out of biblical chronology.
Okay, we have another question here. Well, just a couple more and we'll wrap it up.
Well, we have a lunar month of about, closer? Okay. Our lunar month is about 29 and a half days. But when you go to Genesis 7 and 8, talking about the flood, and there's, like you mentioned, 271 days that they would have been in the ark.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's been figured out that the months that they would be talking about in Genesis 7 and 8 would be 30 day long.
Yeah, 30 days.
Any idea on how you go from one month to another?
No. And like I say, I stay out of that chronology, but you can check on the answers in Genesis.org site and look up some of the stuff Danny Faulkner's read. He's our astronomer. He's a retired astronomer from the University of South Carolina, and he writes a lot of stuff on that. He's a very sharp guy. I think you've had him here before. Have you had him? Danny Faulkner? He's a fun, great guy. I really love Danny. But he writes a lot about that. And so he's the resource to look on that. Look up that question. Put that question out there. They have search engines on these. And so you will get some hits from someone that knows a lot more about it than me.
Just one more quick question. In Saskatchewan, I worked at a potash line.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's potassium chloride, and it's about 3,500 feet deep. And when I was underground, looking at the ceiling, I could see mud cracks that were about 3 feet across within the potash bed.
Mud cracks, or they might just be faults. They're that big.
It was a honeycomb pattern throughout.
Honeycomb on the ceiling.
And then the gaps would have been maybe 2 inches filled with like dirt or clay. So any idea on that?
No, but I know about that potash that they mine there. That is a sample of what they call evaporites. Secular scientists call evaporites because they think they're from a big evaporation area. And some of these, like you said, how thick did you say that was?
The honeycomb pattern would be about 3 feet across
Oh, the honeycomb pattern.
and 2-inch cracks.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I can't tell you on that. I'd have to see pictures. But you said the thickness of the potash was something like what?
Potash beds would be about 11 feet thick.
Oh, they're 11 feet thick. Okay.
And this would have been perhaps right at the top. Like I think
Yeah, at the top.
the potash was caused by evaporating seas.
Yeah, they called it evaporite.
So I wonder if maybe those mud cracks would have been caused by evaporation and then filled in, and then another 3,500 feet of sedimentation on top of that.
Oh, they're under 3,500 feet. Yeah. Yeah, that's an example of what they call evaporites. But some of these so-called evaporites can be 3,000 meters thick and over huge areas. On the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea, below a kilometer of sediment, you have another kilometer of salt and gypsum, another evaporite. We believe they're not evaporites, but precipitates. They precipitate it out of the water. That'd be our take on that. But as far as the honeycomb pattern, I'd have to see pictures of that just to understand it. Otherwise, I really can't tell you what I think about it yet. but interesting.
Yes, Creation BC brought in Danny Faulkner about 10 years ago. He was in Victoria as well. My wife and I were at Creation Museum in Kentucky, and who's hanging around there? Danny Faulkner.
Yeah, Danny Faulkner.
So if anyone hasn't been there, certainly worth going to see.
Yeah.
See the Ark Encounter.
Ark Encounter in the Creation Museum is worth a trip to Kentucky for that. Yes.
I'd like two questions.
Okay.
One is about the shape of the Earth.
The shape of the earth.
Yeah, because I'm looking at a couple different things on biblical cosmology, which some people say it's not global. I'm very confused at times on, space and if that fits into the Bible. Some of the images from NASA and whatnot, if those legitimate. Yeah.
So which images in particular are you thinking of?
It's just some of the, large galaxy structures and nebulae and whatnot. If those are, things that we've seen and if they fit into the Bible.
Well, in the Big Bang model that the secular scientists believe, it is extremely difficult to form a star. It's extremely difficult to form a galaxy. If you really want a good resource on this, there's a series of DVDs by Spike Saris. You spell his last name P-S-A-R-R-I-S. These are superb. What's that? Yeah,
We've had him just within the last couple of years.
Oh, you've had Spike here as a guest. Good. They're greatly done. And he brings up a lot of these issues. He starts with the solar system and shows you how on each planet you have so many contradictions to cosmology, planet after planet. And then he goes out eventually gets out into space, and then he's got one on the Big Bang, and I think he's doing has a fourth one, either out or coming out, I've heard. But they're taught, let's see, how could he get those things? Okay, you have some. Or else you can buy them on creation.com from their web store. But here's a gentleman here that has them. That will probably answer so many of your questions. And you had a second question.
What do you believe is the shape of the Earth?
The shape of the Earth? Oh, well, it's kind of a slightly flattened sphere, kind of a little larger around the equator, caused by the rotation. I forgot what they call that thing in geometry or what? Geoid? I don't know. Not sure. But that's the shape of the Earth.
Okay, I think we should wrap it up here. Thank you, Mike.
You're welcome.
Very good. Let's give Mike one more hand.
Yeah, thank you.